Looking for Steph, relocate, corner three, got it! He's got 12 threes!
Welcome back to another episode of the Bay Area Beat. Today, I'm joined by my old high school buddy Satchel, where we talk the Warriors' huge win over the Grizzlies, Steph's 50-burger, and look ahead to the Warriors' gauntlet of a schedule. With less than 2 weeks till playoffs, there's a lot to dive into, so let's do it. Welcome, Satchel, to the Bay Area Beat.
Happy to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude, anytime. So for the listeners at home, Satchel and I were high school baseball teammates together. We played a little basketball. Satchel was a lot better than I was, so he was a varsity basketball player. Unfortunately, my career ended after my sophomore year when I finished riding the bench for JV. But yeah, Satchel right now, he's working in sports, living out his dream. Satchel, what exactly are you doing these days?
Well, first of all, I wasn't that good at basketball. My 1 year on varsity was more of a charity spot after I had back surgery my junior year, but I guess I was on the team and we did win the championship that year. So
you're also 6'5", so don't bury the lead.
Yeah, I don't know if you can tell based on my setup or whatever, but nowadays I'm working all over the place doing all sorts of sports stuff. I broadcast games for Sonoma State, which soon to be defunct, at least athletically, which is really sad. And then also Academy of Art in San Francisco. Doing kind of all sports right now, just kind of whatever they need, I'm there for. And then I also work in scoreboard production for the Giants and the 49ers, which is super awesome. I'm out at just like so many Giants games, all the Niners games. I do a little bit of TV stuff behind the scenes too. And I've been blessed in my few years out of college to work some pretty cool events. Like I got to work one of the games in the conference finals in 22. I worked All-Star this year. I was at the NFC Championship game last year. So it's been a good time for me and for Bay Area sports lately, and I'm living the dream, man.
Yeah, man, we're gonna get into how awesome of a couple of weeks we've had in terms of Bay Area sports. I'm gonna put the Niners aside for now, as it's a lot of off-season shenanigans. But it's awesome to hear that you're kind of working in sports, living out your dream. Is broadcasting where you want to go long term?
Yeah, that's the goal, and I'm got my start with these D2 colleges. I'm having fun with it. Broadcasting is generally a long path. So, this is just the start of what is probably going to be a very long journey. But that is the goal, to be a better version of like Joe Buck or, Jim Nance. But sure. I try to take a lot from Creek and Kipe and try to make my stuff fun. But, I still got a lot to learn. But it's been really fun. That is where I'm trying to get to.
Right on, man. It's definitely nice having, in my opinion, the best broadcasters in baseball as your home broadcast team 162 times a year. And, obviously I'm openly will admit I'm as biased as it gets there, but listening to Creek and Kipe our entire lifetime, and then having the MLB TV app and turning on the Astros game, and for the first 30 seconds, it doesn't switch over to the local broadcast. And it's like, this is a night and day. I mean, whether it's color commentary or even just the conversations, you feel like you're just a third guy on the couch listening to those guys. I'm rooting for you, man. That's awesome. Broadcasting has always been something I've kind of in a way aspired to do, but also recognize how competitive the industry is. And I think podcasting is probably the closest I've come to doing something in the media landscape. And even that I've learned is it's challenging to hold an audience for a half an hour and to continue to say unique, interesting things in front of a mic.
And that's the thing too, is like early on, especially, you don't really get to work with a partner very often. So I'm just out here by myself talking about sports that I don't always know very well, like volleyball or soccer, which is just hard to do by yourself. Like I like soccer, I think, more than the average American. But even then, like doing a soccer game by yourself when like no one's there is like, it's hard, and it's a lot of work. Eventually I'm going to have to end up in the middle of buttfuck nowhere before I get my move up to the big leagues or what have you. But,
playing in Chattanooga.
Yeah, right. Yeah, somewhere in like Little Rock, Arkansas or something like that. But for now, I'm in California, which I'm enjoying, but that's not going to last forever.
Hey man, everyone's got to start somewhere, and you're doing it and you're making it happen, which is all you can be doing at our age. So yeah, let's get into Dubs and into Giants. So we're taping this on Wednesday, April 2nd. If you're watching on YouTube and see either Satchel or I turning our head, that's because the Giants and Astros right now are in the 6th inning in a 5-3 ball game. I'm hoping by the time we get to the Giants later on in the show that we're talking about a win and then being 5-1, or at least on the verge of it in the 9th inning. But let's do Warriors for now. So last night the Warriors came off I think, the best win of the season, or if not the best, one of the best, a beating of Memphis in Memphis to take control of the 5 seed. Yeah, they're 12-0 with the starting 5 of Steph, Jimmy, Dre, Pods, Moody. They're 18-2 while Steph and Jimmy are playing. And every game, I feel like I'm starting to believe in this team more and more.
You get to see it really in these tight games, and that's what the playoffs is going to be like, right? Sure, there's blowouts in the playoffs, but for the most part, you're in tight games. And having Steph and Jimmy, and just anyone other than Steph out there who can create either for themselves or for others, and what they've been able to do has made such a huge difference for them. And that's why I think that they can still go on a run. Is having to defend the two of them is going to be hard for teams to figure out, especially when Steph plays like he did last night. There's nothing you can do about that.
What, 12 threes, 8 in the first half. He was incredible. And I completely agree. These are the rock fight, the gritty games that really come to fruition night in and night out in the playoffs. And they don't really quit, which is one of the coolest things about this team. When they blow a lead, they were up 17 in the first quarter against the Grizzlies, and they blow the lead in the third quarter. They don't give up. I think we both probably would agree that a Warriors team earlier in the season would fold as soon as the lead was broken. And they just exude a type of confidence. Everyone knows their role. They have an actual identity that they haven't had in past years. And it feels like they're all just kind of calm, composed when it gets gritty, when you hit these crunch time moments in the fourth quarter. And it's really just awesome to see.
And I think the biggest thing too is that with this kind of small ball lineup that they've just got, that's a 5 that is going to just get after it, right? Moody, Pods, even if they're not necessarily producing, those guys are going to dive on the floor. You saw Pods last night with that tip in over Jaw, who just didn't box him out. One of the biggest plays of the game. And those are that's what you need, especially in the playoffs when everything's on the line. You need guys who are just going to just get after it.
I'm glad you brought up Pods and Moody, because when we see them at their best, like we saw against the Spurs, and granted, it's the San Antonio Spurs without Wemby, without De'Aaron Fox, but when we see these guys at their best, I think the Dubs are borderline unbeatable. They have obviously Steph and Dre and Jimmy, but when you have your key role players hitting shots, you see Moody guarding the best team's opposing guard. They're just so hard to beat. And then you see kind of the flip side of it last night, outside the last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter. They both kind of struggled. Pods was really couldn't hit a shot to save his life. And they all of a sudden became a little bit more beatable. Teams are able to sag off them a little more, not give Steph the same space that we've seen when they're both threats from the perimeter. And yeah, I think they're really going to be the 2 X factors, or the 2 biggest X factors come playoff time.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I think people underrate sometimes is Moses Moody does have some postseason experience. This was one of the things for me that I never really fully understood in the kind of couple lost years that Moses Moody has had the last couple of years, is during the conference finals against Dallas in 22, he had some games where he was in there in important moments, making plays and just getting that experience. And then he had these couple lost years. Yeah, he hasn't been through the grind fully, but he's not necessarily going to shrink, I think, in the way people might expect him to. And for Pods, man, he does everything. And something that you forget about sometimes is even if these guys are having an off night, if you sag off of one of them, sometimes that creates plays for Steph where he can just get a screen from them because their defender's in the paint. You can only sag off of them so much during the playoffs, and people lose track of Steph all the time. As you saw last night, he got some looks off of that in that amazing game.
Yeah, they lose track of him, or if you literally turn your back like Santi Aldama did, I think in the second quarter for a split second, that's enough separation he needs to hit a 35-footer. And no one in the history of basketball is better than Steph Curry at hitting those long-range shots. And speaking of Steph, I'll take blame here. Probably buried the lead getting into Pods and Moody before getting into Steph last night. He finished with 52 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, was 2 assists away from a 50-point triple-double, which would have been one of the crazier stat lines I've ever seen until Jokic had a 60-point triple-double about 2 hours later. And yeah, Steph shot 12 for 20 from 3. I think at some point, I want to say it was early in the fourth quarter, it seemed like he was shot jacking a little bit and was looking to break Clay's record. Granted, no one else could really hit a shot outside of him and Jimmy, so I don't really ever have an issue with Steph kind of shot jacking and finding a shot. But he was incredible last night. And a few fun stats just to give a little more context. Games with 11 made threes in a game. Steph has 15, Clay has 4, Lillard has 4, Zach LaVine has 2. And then games with 12 plus threes, Steph has 4, Clay has 3, and then the only 2 other players that ever have it once is Lillard and Kobe. So it just shows a little more evidence of how much of a one-of-one player Steph is.
Well, and that's the thing. I think you're right. Like, definitely think there was a moment in that fourth quarter where Steph was like, he could feel it a little bit and he was trying to chase it. He definitely thinks about that from time to time, because if you look at all the 3-point records, whatever way you slice it, however you want to cut it down and be like, in this specific situation or from here or from there, whatever, Steph has all the records except for that one.
Yeah.
And I think before it's all said and done, I'd like to think he'll get it. But one of the things that stuck out to me last night, he also had 5 steals. I've seen some mixed reporting on whether he was the first or second player ever to do this, but he was either the first or second player ever to have 50 points, 10 threes, and 5 steals in a game ever.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Incredible. I think he had a block too to go along with it, so 6 stocks in total. He also passed LeBron for the most 50-point games of all time, which, as someone who's not a big LeBron guy, I love any stat where you can put Steph over him. One thing I want to get into, and I want to preface it with saying I'm not a blame the ref guy. Like, throughout my lifetime of being a sports fan, like, I hate when people, the first thing they do when they lose is to blame the ref, blame the officiating. With all that being said, though, I felt like last night was a particularly unfair whistle where we saw multiple moments where not only Steph was getting pushed on jumpers, but also, like, on the flip side of things, anything that you try to touch jaw or Triple J inside was called.
As a Warriors fan, especially, it can be so frustrating. And I saw they asked Steph on the post-game interview about that last night, and he was like, this has been my reality. Like, I'm kind of used to it. Like, obviously it frustrates me, but it happens every day, and I can't just, like, let it, get to me. But as a fan watching that, you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, this is ridiculous sometimes. But at the same time, honestly, I think it might be good preparation for them. A, because they've got the Lakers coming up, and B, with the playoffs coming and, like, potentially seeing OKC, you're going to get into some of that with the way some of those teams play. And so I think it's kind of good now to start practicing, dealing with some kind of awkward officiating and, like, trying to show restraint based on how the game is being called. And that was the thing about last night too, is that was a playoff feeling game. And so I think that was the biggest thing too that came out of that performance, was just that, like, they're really getting into it now. Like, the rest of the season basically is going to feel that way up until the postseason actually starts.
Absolutely. It totally felt like just a playoff game in early April. Like, we saw them shoot 26 for 26 from the free throw line, which was huge. I think every one of those points was needed. It ended up being like a 8-10 point game when it's all said and done. I don't have the exact box score, but that was a 1-possession game into the last 90 seconds. I don't want to continue to bash on the Grizzlies. They've had a tough go of it the last week or so. They've lost 11 of 19 since the All-Star break. They just fired Taylor Jenkins, who is their all-time winningest coach in franchise history. One thing I have a little bit of a gripe on, and I think it's particularly timely now, as Draymond Green and Triple J are the co-favorites for the Defensive Player of the Year. How in the world can Triple J, who's already won the award before, be a Defensive Player of the Year when he's fouling out every fourth game?
I mean, I don't know. I think Draymond should probably have 2 or 3 of those awards already. But I think it's one of those things where, honestly, Rudy Gobert winning it so many times kind of, like, tarnished it a little bit. I don't want to say that, but I think it is a bit true, just in the way that he wins the award, and then, like, every year he's won the award, he's gone out in the playoffs and just gotten absolutely abused. And, like, I honestly don't care, like, what the context is. You can't be the Defensive Player of the Year and be, like, a liability to your team. And also, like, with Jaren Jackson Jr., like, some of those fouls are silly too. Like, obviously, like, some of it is earned, but some of it's just silly. And I think that's the thing, is it's like you gotta be smarter than that sometimes.
Totally. They are silly. And, like, he fouled out last night, I want to say, with like 7-8 minutes left in the fourth quarter in a tie game. Like, Draymond, when he gets his 5th foul, he's still as aggressive as he is in the 5 fouls prior, but he knows how to defend guys without fouling. And I think guys like Triple J, who are incredible shot blockers and is one of the 5 best defensive players in the league, I'll give him that. Like, you can't simply be fouling out and forcing your team to play full quarters without you in crunch time. if you're going to be the defensive player of the year. And I hear everything you're saying. Rudy Gobert has completely marred the entire award. The guy doesn't play full series because of matchups. So I hear you there. It's just, it drives me crazy because right now, Jaren Jackson might be pacing Draymond and becoming the leading favorite again. And I see that guy foul out more than anyone else in the NBA, and it drives me crazy.
Yeah, but I mean, I think this is like one of the things that's kind of indicative of just where Memphis is at right now. Some of the dysfunction that's happening around that team, and you mentioned some of their recent play. All of those 11 losses and now 12 with the Warriors beating them last night have come against teams with winning records, which seems to indicate that they're gonna limp into the playoffs, and they could be a relatively quick exit when they get there. And that's been the issue with this team. Because they had those couple years where they were the 2 seed in back-to-back years. They couldn't advance to the conference finals in either season. And it's just something about this team, just they don't quite know how to win games when they really need to figure that out.
I think they're going to get swept, if not a 5-game series, and whoever they play. I think whether it's the Warriors or the Clippers or even the Wolves, I think they're going to be in the play-in tournament. They played their worst basketball in the most recent stretch, and they are just very beatable. One interesting thought I had while Steph was going crazy last night was we've seen pre-pandemic Steph. He is a 2-time MVP. He's the only unanimous MVP in NBA history. He has 3 championships. He's doing stuff that no one's ever seen before. And then in this post-pandemic Steph, post-injury where he had like 18 months to recover, get his body right. We've seen him, he has the championship. He has the finals MVP. He doesn't have the same statistical prowesses of the heights of 2016 and 2017. But I am not sure, and I'm going to give my take after you, but I don't know if I necessarily think that was a better Steph come pre-pandemic. What do you think? Which Steph do you prefer?
It's hard because on the one hand, like I think my favorite Steph game of all time has to be Game 4 in Boston, right? That almost brought tears to my eyes watching that game.
All time.
But at the same time, I feel like honestly, like pre-pandemic and like Dynasty Steph doesn't get enough credit because I think, some of the stuff that he's doing now, he was always capable of then, but he just didn't have the opportunity in some cases because his teams were so good that like he missed so many fourth quarters of games where he probably could have put up more 60-point games, more 50-point games, but they were up by 30. And so it was like, well, I'm not going to go out here and chase stats and like sprain my ankle on a random Tuesday against the Charlotte Hornets, And so I do think pre-pandemic Steph doesn't get enough love. And like the fact that he's really had to come out post-pandemic and even like kind of earn respect from people still was kind of always something that bothered me. And so while I do love this version of Steph that we've got right now, I got to show some love to the previous iteration.
Fair enough. And I think most people would say, just based on the numbers alone, that he was at his peak in 2016, 2017. And I'm not here to argue that. Like, he was quicker, he was harder to get off his spots, but this version of Steph Curry just feels more inevitable to me. When it's 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter in crunch time, I just have more confidence that he's going to make that 3. And maybe that's just anecdotal and that like he's been so clutch, particularly the last 2 or 3 years. Like, he won Clutch Player of the Year last year, but he just feels like he is more of an inevitable scorer. Just without as much around him, he has figured out new innovative ways to still be a top 5, top 10 player. And outside of Jimmy Butler, has had a lot of role players as teammates the last couple of years.
No, I mean, definitely. I mean, that 22 team that he dragged to the championship, I mean, those guys didn't necessarily look great on paper, and I get it. He has had, I think, a lot more like moments like that maybe in his post-pandemic years. And I mean, the craziest thing too, that they were showing some of these stats on the broadcast last night, is that he's got the most 50-point games by a player after turning 30.
Right.
Which is crazy to me that like he's got this kind of longevity for someone who's 6'2" and has, ankles that usually go out once or twice a year. But it's been crazy to see the transformation he's gone through. Like, and you could notice it like coming out of the pandemic and everything, that he's bigger and stronger and more muscular.
Absolutely.
And he's like had some sort of like philosophical evolution within himself, but is still largely the same player.
Another point I kind of wanted to get into, and I don't want to bash him, is Jonathan Kuminga. Do you think they win if he's playing last night? And I've talked about this before on a few other podcasts. Like, I think the potential of Jonathan Kuminga is incredible, and he may be worthwhile to extend this offseason simply to say that you saw the full potential. But he's kind of just hasn't fit in with this team since he's returned. And I don't think he has the time to find his footing before the playoffs. Do you?
Probably not. Maybe, if they are able to avoid the play-in and get a little bit of that extra rest, it might be, helpful to reintegrate him. Because I do think to some extent they will need him. Just like his size and athleticism alone, and like that is going to mean something to them. I don't know how much or how much he's going to play or if he'll close. Probably not, just because their starting five has been so good. But it's hard to give up on a talent like that. But I think the thing for me as an outside observer that I have always questioned, and it has been a weird thing for me to see, is you can never tell where his mind is at,
Mm-hmm.
Like on a day-to-day, game-to-game. Like some games, he looks really engaged, and then some games he just like loses somebody on a back cut 3 times because he's just kind of space cadet. He's always, I think, had trouble buying into whatever the Warriors have been doing, and that's more the thing I think that concerns me, is just like where's his mentals at.
And I think it's really hard to have him buy in or to have him fully engaged right now in whatever role he is, because at this moment in time, he's not a starter, he's not a closer. They need really critical crunch time minutes late in the first, transitioning into the second. They want him to pair alongside Steph on that bench unit so he can create his own shot and gives Steph some more space as guys kind of have to clamp inside. But I don't think they have the time to ramp him up. And Steve Kerr clearly doesn't have confidence in playing him in crunch time. He didn't really have a clear fit on the roster before this most recent injury. And I hate to say it, but I expect a lot of DNPs come playoffs. And I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. But he just can't shoot. He can't space the floor. He struggles to play smart team basketball, like you said, with missing a lot of back cuts. And I think all of that is important in the NBA, but it is essential to play on this Warriors team.
Yeah, and I mean it's tough because it's like, you can see these flashes, and maybe they will get him to buy in. Maybe, and that's the thing, is like, because he can, at minimum, he could just go out there and just be a lockdown defender and change games that way, and like maybe win you a game or two in the playoffs. But he needs to want to do that.
Do you think the Warriors need him or GP2 more for this playoff stretch run?
Probably GP2, in the sense of that he will do those things. And honestly, maybe is even a slightly better 3-point shooter. At least it feels that way.
Definitely.
But it does help to have Kuminga, just to have someone else who can occasionally create for himself, especially when Steph's not in the game. And also, it'd be helpful to have him just using his athleticism to like draw some fouls, because if they can get themselves, into the bonus with regularity with Jimmy Butler and the way he draws contact, that could also be a big boost for them. And it is nice to have a lob threat, both just because they get so many like pick and rolls where Steph's giving it off to Draymond or Jimmy at the elbow, and to have someone running that baseline, and also just it's fun to watch sometimes when he's, that's the thing too, is he's such an exciting player to watch when he's engaged, when he's getting after it. Like, no one can fly like him.
Absolutely. I think GP2 is a lot more important to this team. It sucks that it was a shooting hand, torn ligament in his shooting hand, because he was shooting so well post All-Star break. I think he was like 45% from 3 since the Jimmy trade. But, we have 2 weeks or so before the first round is going to kick off. That should hopefully give him a little more time. He broke his elbow with that dirty Dillon Brooks cheap shot in 2022 and came back within 3-4 weeks. So I guess with that being said, that is kind of the whole thing with GP2, is he's awesome when he plays, and he's really is that quintessential glue guy, but he's been hurt over and over again. And this one's kind of a fluke injury. Like, I don't want to blame a guy for tearing a ligament in his thumb, but if it's not this, it's his ankle or his knee. And it's going to be tricky to rely on him for 4 playoff series, just knowing his injury history.
Definitely, and I think that's another reason why you need to have Kuminga, because you just don't know how much GP2 you're going to get, right? And then, you're going to have to take advantage of when he's out there. Like when he's out there, you're going to have to win those games because it's going to be a lot harder if you fall behind in a series and also lose him,
Absolutely.
And so, we'll see how it shakes out. I'd like to think that he'll start game one of the playoffs, but, we'll see. But I'm optimistic about it. But obviously, I'm no doctor.
So I want to look ahead. So the Warriors next week is an absolute gauntlet. They're playing the Lakers tomorrow. They have a back-to-back playing the Nuggets at home, luckily the following night, and then they close against the Rockets to end the week on Sunday night. These are likely the Warriors' 3 first-round matchups. Right now, it being the Lakers in the 4-5, but the Nuggets are just above them, and the Rockets now separated themselves a little bit, but are still in the 2 seed. So any of these teams, the Warriors could face off in about 2.5 weeks from now. What do you think the goal is for this 3-game stretch? Do we think it's possible that they can go 3-0 with this brutal back-to-back? And do we even want that, I guess, with knowing who may be the 2 seed or who may be the 3 seed?
I mean, I think they're at the point where I think their goal is always 3-0, and it's like, I don't know that you're in a place where you can afford to like try to manipulate the standings right now. So you just got to beat who's in front of you. And I think it'll be good for them to see how they come out against the Lakers because it'll be the first time they've played them since the Luka trade. And catching Denver shortly after this double overtime game, I'm sure will help a little bit in that sense. And that's been a team that they haven't been able to tame in quite some time. And so it might be nice to just have a little confidence boost if you can beat them just once, just to be like, we can beat them. Although Steph's never lost to the Nuggets in the playoffs, but two very, very different iterations of the Nuggets. And I think if they're the team that we want them to be or that they think they are, that 3-0 should feel attainable. So you're going to have to beat probably 2 of these teams en route to the conference finals or even the finals. And so you need to win at least 2, if not all 3 of these games just to, kind of make your statement.
Do we see any gamesmanship like we would in football? Like, are there any rotations or schemes the Dubs try to hide for playoffs, knowing these are likely their first-round matchups?
I don't know, because I don't know if that's something that they're worried about. Now, I think maybe they won't necessarily pull out all the stops defensively in these games necessarily because you don't want to put any of that on tape. But other than that, I think that they're going to play them pretty straight up. Like I'm sure there would be some different strategies that they'd employ, like what they did even against the Nuggets last time, where they were kind of just like, here, let Aaron Gordon shoot a bunch of shots, and he made them. They're probably still going to do that, but I don't think there's going to be that much gamesmanship, especially considering they have a couple of cupcakes with the Spurs and Blazers afterwards, that I think you want to try to go hard against these teams that are above you in the standings. And then if you feel like you need to take your foot off the gas and maybe rest some guys or whatever, you can do that against some of the weaker teams in the conference next weekend.
So as we're taping this, the Warriors, as we mentioned, are now the 5 seed, 2 back of the Lakers, 2.5 back of Denver for the 4 and 3 seeds, respectively. They're a half game up on Memphis and Minnesota and a full game up on the Clippers. In my lifetime watching basketball, I would say that's probably 2007 and beyond. This is the tightest I remember the Western Conference being. The Clippers right now are surging. They're 8-2 in their last 10. They beat the Grizz. They beat the Cavs, the Pistons. They had a 2-point loss against the Thunder. It seems like the Rockets and Nuggets are also kind of separating themselves as the 2 and 3 seeds in the West. Looking at the most difficult schedules for the rest of the season, so the Lakers have the 4th most difficult. Houston has the 5th. The Nuggets are at 9. The Warriors are at 12. Memphis is at 17. The Clippers are 19th, so one of the easier schedules in the NBA. And the Timberwolves have the easiest schedule in the NBA, with only Memphis and Milwaukee as their more difficult matchups. And then they get to play 2 against the Nets. They get to play the tanking 76ers and the tanking Utah Jazz. So that's where I think I'm most concerned, at least, is still the Wolves. The Clippers have been excellent. They have played up to their potential in a healthy Kawhi and James Harden season. I don't know if you can hear the ambulances going by. It's driving me crazy a little bit. But I guess my question to you is, who would you rather see, the Lakers or the Nuggets?
I think, as crazy as this might sound, I think it's the Nuggets. Because I feel like seeing Luka and LeBron and Austin Reeves in the playoff series is scary. And also just because of, like, I hate to be the officiating guy, but honestly, like, I'd feel a little bit uneasy about the officiating in that series.
Completely.
quite frankly. Just with, Austin Reeves being who he is and Luka also, being that guy. And especially the first round, yeah, they tighten up the whistles a little bit, but I feel like that's something that progresses round by round, And so in a first round series, I could imagine that being an issue. But I know that's probably what the league wants. The Lakers and Warriors in the 4-5, and the winner of that series takes on OKC, and it's the new guard versus the old guard. That's probably, Adam Silver is salivating at the idea of LeBron or Steph getting a shot to take down Shea, or OKC slaying the Dragon en route to a title. So I think that's the most likely matchup, but I would rather see the Nuggets. And I mentioned this to you when we were planning, and I know it's something we don't even want to think about, but like, quite frankly, I'd rather them see the Rockets in the first round, just because I feel the most confident that they could beat the Rockets, but I know that at this point that means being in the play-in, and we don't necessarily want to see that happen.
I didn't even mention the Rockets because I think they are the most obvious choice out of the three. I mean, any betting odds you look at, like the Warriors, the Lakers, and the Nuggets are kind of all in the same group, well below the Thunder, who are the prohibited favorites. Right now, they have about an implied probability of 60% to win the West, which I think is absurd. And I, frankly, would love a Thunder series. We always play them super tough. I hear what you're saying on the Lakers. I think that for me, one of the more challenging things is knowing how good of a whistle they get, even without AD. Like Luka and LeBron yelling in a ref's ear time after time, like as good as you want to say these NBA refs can be, there is a certain psyche that goes on when a guy is kind of yelling in your face about a call over and over again. I think for me, it's the Nuggets. Jokic is, in my opinion, by far the best player in the world. I don't think that's a hot take. I think he's actually right now probably the gap between him and I'd say maybe Shea at number 2 as big as I've seen in a very long time. He has always given the Warriors fits. I know the supporting cast around him is not very impressive. Jamal Murray, when he gets hot, that tandem is very tough to stop. But it's a Michael Porter's. They're relying way too much on Christian Braun and Peyton Watson. But having the best player in the world and at a position where the Warriors struggle the most, at a center position, I think is, in my opinion, who I want to avoid at all costs. I think this was all the questions, all the conversation points of topic I had, Satchel. This was awesome. I really enjoyed kind of rekindling, getting to chat Giants and Warriors.
Yeah, man, it was awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Great chatting, Satch. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Definitely. All right, you too, man.
Now, if you made it to the end of the episode, I want to say thank you. If you don't mind subscribing and maybe even dropping a like, you'll become my new best friend. I produce these Bay Area sports podcasts twice a week, and I'm looking to grow my audience as much as I can. You can find the audio version of the podcast on Spotify or Apple Pods at the Bay Area Beat, and on YouTube at Bay Area Beat. You can also find short clips on all socials under the same name. Thanks again for listening. Catch you all next week.